The Ordered Universe project is an AHRC funded project, initially funded through a network grant, which was a grant specifically to establish a group of scholars interested in understanding the writings of Robert Grosseteste and particularly his writings on natural phenomena.
This is part of the Being Human Festival, and this is our contribution to that. So the primary aim is to share our fun and joy and some of the challenges that we find in our research, and to share this with the general public.
We've got a problem to solve, which is to understand the context and the content of Grosseteste's writing. And the only way we can do that is by coming together with experts in different areas.
So we've got humanities scholars, Latinists, paleographers, scientists of different disciplines, scientists working with these humanities scholars, looking at 13th century treatises on scientific topics by this extraordinary English polymath mind, Robert Grosseteste.
He's one of the most fascinating characters of the Middle Ages. There was a wonderful book written in the 1950s called The 13th Greatest of Centuries, and Grosseteste is one of the greatest figures in this century. A polymath, he's a scientist, a religious thinker, theologian, he's a politician, he writes on agriculture.
From around 1220 to 15 to around 1225, 1230, he wrote a series of about a dozen manuscripts.
The manuscripts that we're working on are particularly his descriptions of natural phenomena, and his passion is to try to understand the natural phenomena around him and to give some explanation of them.
Here we are in Prior's Hall. This is part of the deanery. It's a wonderful part of the cathedral complex, and we're holding here the collaborative reading part of the day, where the groups are literally going through Grosseteste's texts and translations with our team of experts. We have humanities and sciences working together with the public and taking us through this research exercise that we engage in.
It was interesting when we first started running these workshops. The first one we ran, a group of scientists sat down on one side of the room and a group of humanities scholars sat down on the other side of the room, across the table facing one another. And as the project's gone on, we've got much better at talking to one another, trusting one another, and appreciating and understanding the different approaches to the same material.
It's not simply a question of us humanities experts providing the translation and the scientists providing the meaning. We do it together. The scientists help us with the translation, help out teasing the logic of the treatise, what Grosseteste might really be talking about, and then we explain the context. And between the two, you end up with a fuller and richer picture of what Grosseteste is talking about.
The biggest thing that's coming out of it is this idea that you don't have to separate the disciplines off anymore, but you can find ways to work together and produce these great insights and new knowledge about sort of physics and the history of physics and the kind of understanding that we get. And it's also important, I think, to see that this 13th century bishop was looking at this kind of subject, was trying to get under the skin of what was going on, how the natural world worked, and it wasn't an issue of him trying to prove religion over science or anything like that, but these things all work together, and certainly in his mind this was all one endeavor to understand how the world worked, was a spiritual and a scientific thing.
Brian Tanner, one of our physics experts, is leading a session on how you might take some of the experiments that Grosseteste describes. Whether he actually carried them out or not is a matter for debate, but actually to extract the sort of scientific experiments from the treatises as well.
So we're doing experiments about lenses, focusing things, non-parallax and refraction with glass blocks and mirrors and things like that.
Some of the things that I think turn people off modern science is that there's a lot of background knowledge that is assumed in discussions of science. One of the things that's nice about medieval science is that you have to strip away many of those assumptions. And so experts and people who are coming to it afresh are sort of on a level playing field in a way, because you can't bring your expert knowledge to this. You have to think again about what are the scientific issues.
Everybody in this room is bringing their background to it, but seems to be adding to it as well, not just the academics.
None of us know the answers. So it's not possible to understand the manuscripts just as a scientist without a huge amount of support from the humanities scholars. But that's equally true the other way around. The humanities scholars couldn't understand the manuscripts without help and support from the scientists. And so I think it's a It's a levelling experience for both of us that we can't do it on our own.
The humanities scholars benefit because together we can produce better, sharper, deeper, more critical commentaries, editions, translations than we had before of the text, and open that up to a wider public who appreciate that the humanities opens up their inheritance to them.
We have done new science. When I say we, the scientists have done new science from the inspiration that these treatises have given us. Together, we've also produced some wonderful commentaries and a new range of insight into Grosseteste's scientific achievement.
It's brought quite a lot of joy around the world to people whose core belief is that our disciplines live together at their core and shouldn't be fragmented in the way they often are, and that science is a deeply human, deeply historical activity.
The people who have been here today have been very helpful actually, because they have a general interest in science and history, and they keep asking very good questions that help us along. We already made a footnote for one of our texts based on input from one member of the public who had a great question that caused Tom McLeish to have a very good idea. So it has been very helpful to have intelligent people from the general public giving their input and helping us along.
For someone like me who doesn't really have any kind of classical education but is pretty interested in science, it begins to answer some of the big questions about how people were thinking in the past, but because it's marrying it with what's happening in the university now, I think it also helps us look towards the future.
We often think, we've got the answer, this is our best current understanding and this is how the world is. Well, actually it's just our best guess, and Grosseteste had his best guess, and now we can look at it and say, well, he was wrong, but we could equally be as wrong, and I think it reminds us that this sort of scientific exploration is part of a journey, and we're just one small step on that way in a bigger journey.